The song from somewhere else, Monday, and this is part 2. The inside of the house wasn't what Frank had expected. Nick's school jumpers always had food on them, and his shirts weren't always washed as often as everyone else would like. He certainly never brushed his hair. Everyone knew he smelt. Probably had fleas. But the house didn't seem to be like that. For a start, the hall was clean and bright. The walls were white, and big, colourful abstract pictures hung on them. More pictures were stacked against the wall as if they were waiting to find homes. There were no carpets, but the floorboards were painted white, and it made it feel like you on holiday. It was calm, quiet. Underneath the clumping of their shoes and the floorboards was a quiet quite unlike anything she'd ever heard at home. Her brother would always cry in the middle of a silence, or her dad would turn on the radio in the kitchen and let old, boring music fill the house. The only odd thing, she thought, was the smell. It was something like a forest. It wasn't unpleasant, but it didn't smell like indoors. It smelled cold, wet, not damp, but ancient. It wasn't air freshener and polish like her own home. It wasn't like Jessie's house, which always smelled of new paint and old dog. It was odd, that was all. Nicholas's dad made them some squash. He offered them biscuits. "I don't think we met before," he said. "What did Nick say your name was?" "Francesca Patel, Dad. She's in my class at school." "Most people call me Frank," she added. "Frank? Well, make yourself at home. Do you guys want to watch TV or something?" "No," she said, eating a biscuit. "Thanks, but I really ought to get back. I was just putting up some posters. Mum and Dad will start to worry about me if I'm not home soon." Her heart sank as she thought about the posters that had been ripped up, and sank further as she remembered Quintinius Minimus. In all the excitement, he'd quite slipped her mind. That was dreadful. "Our cat's missing," she said. "That's what the posters were for." "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that," Nicholas's dad said. "I can give you a lift home if you like. Make sure you get home safe. The car's out the front. You live far?" "Just the other side of the park," she said, and told him the address. He seemed friendly. Frank liked him. He went off to find the car keys. Nicholas was slowly nibbling the edge of his biscuit. He looked up at her. She'd never noticed how grey his eyes were before. They were like stones, like little sea-washed pebbles. "Is your mum around?" she asked, for something to say. His dad seemed friendly, and she imagined his mum might be too. It was a puzzle as to why that kid had turned out so weird, but sometimes that was the way, wasn't it? Nice people probably had kids who were a bit backward and who got picked on and ignored at school all the time. It was called genetics. "No," Nick said. "She's not here. She doesn't live here." "Well done," said her stomach. Perfect question. Oh, thought Frank, that was embarrassing. She felt suddenly ashamed. She'd not known that. Somehow, in the back of her mind, something like a whisper made her think that maybe she had known that, had heard it somewhere, in the playground or in class. To cover her embarrassment, and because she wasn't really thinking, she said something stupid. "My mum's not at home much either. She works a lot." Nick looked at her and blinked slowly. So did her stomach. After a moment she said, "You sure you've got to go? Already?" But he said it softly. "Yeah, better," she said. "I'm worried. They'll be worried." He wanted her to stay. It was so obvious. God, she thought, Nicholas Umbridge thinks I'm his friend. What am I going to do? No one must know. I'll die of embarrassment. Before they left, she used their loo. As Frank sat there on the toilet under the stairs, she looked at her feet and pondered the situation. How could she dislodge Nicholas, get away from him, get him to leave her alone? Could she really do that after he'd helped her out, after he stood up for her in the way he did? Well, she had to, before anyone else, before Jess came home from holiday. It was that simple. And then, as she sat and thought, she heard the strangest sound. "Shut up and listen," her stomach said. "Lend me your ears." It was faint. It was spooky. It was distant, far off, and it was quite beautiful. It was music of a sort she'd never heard of before. She was suddenly filled with shoals of fish, darting and moving like one great whole, darting and flowing this way and that, darting and flashing, hundreds and hundreds of silver fish, all moving as they shared one brain. And that was what she saw as she heard this faint, distant music. It was like overhearing a conversation between your mum and dad about your birthday presents, one you're not supposed to hear. one you've hidden at the top of the stairs to listen into, purely by accident. No piece of music she'd ever heard on the radio or in the background of a TV show had ever made her feel so special, had made her feel so cared for, so improved. Shh, hissed her stomach. You're thinking too loud. Where was it coming from? It seems to be all round her, sort of, but in a distance. It was odd. Maybe Mr. Umbridge had turned the radio on, but they were going out, so why would he have done that? And besides, she could hear the pair of them moving about in the hall outside the loo. Then the music stopped. No, it didn't stop. It faded, vanished, without actually ending. It had only been faint, almost too faint to hear. She thought now. It was the sort of thing that she had read in a book. The character in the book would have said, maybe I imagined it. She wasn't in the book. She hadn't imagined it. She was certain. I'm certain too, her stomach said, on her side for once. The kettle clicked off just as she opened the back door. There was rolls of steam churning under the cupboard where the plates lived. The radio was talking in between songs. Where have you been? Her mum said, gathering Frank up in a hug and letting her go almost at once. They both stepped backwards. We've been worried sick. Your dad's been out looking for you. He's out there now. He found your bike at the wreck, but you weren't anywhere. A bike? She'd completely forgotten about it. One of the wheels was bent. We didn't know what had happened to you. It's okay, Mum, Frank said. I just went around a friend's house and I forgot about the time. Friend? What friend? Just a boy in my class. What's his name? Nicholas, Nick, Frank said. Her mum frowned. I don't think I know him. He's tall, Frank said. Her mum thought a moment. And wide? She asked. Maybe I've seen him. I don't know. I didn't know you were friends. Well, we're not really friends, Frank said. I just met him over the wreck and... I thought you were putting up posters for Quinn. Your dad said he found... There was an accident, Frank interrupted, knowing what her dad had found at the wreck, confettied all over the tarmac. There was this dog and it ran over and tore the posters up. It ripped them out of my hand and shook them like mad. Nicholas and Aunt and me had to run away. That's why we went back to his house. He lives over by the school. She felt satisfied with this story. It made perfect sense, fitted in neatly together. It was usually easy to give parents a sort of version of the truth. It stopped all those stupid, nosy questions. A mad dog was less humiliating than Neil Noble and his thugs. A dog? Was anyone round? The owner, I mean. Did you get bit? Let me see. Are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. He wasn't really mad or anything. Just didn't like the posters. Probably because I had a photo of Quintinius Minimus on. You know, dogs don't like cats. That's just the way things go. You should get the police to look into it if you've been attacked, and at the playground too. Her mum was taking this too seriously now, thinking too hard and talking more to herself than to Frank, but at least she was distracted from telling her off. Yeah, there was someone, Frank said, thinking on her feet. But they were a bit back. They were running over to the dog, but we ran off before they got there. What did the dog look like? I don't remember. You must remember, surely, darling. No, I don't remember. Next time, okay? Okay, her mum said gently, lifting her hands. How about a cup of tea? Kettles are spoiled. No, thanks. I don't like tea. Frank went through to the lounge. She stared at the television. It wasn't switched on. She watched herself pulling faces on the screen. She heard the fridge door shut, and her mum appeared at the doorway, clutching her mug in both hands. You should have phoned, though, she said. That's all. What about Dad? Frank asked. Oh, God, her mum said. I forgot. Can you ring him, dear? Tell him you're home. My phone's on the table there. Before Frank could pick it up, it rang. She didn't recognise the name, but read it out to her mum. It's work, darling, she said. I've got to take it. She put her tea down and put the phone to her ear and began one of those long, baffling conversations that were forever interrupting things. Frank phoned her dad on the old landline instead. That night, Frank lay in a bed, staring at the ceiling. There was a full moon, and every time a breeze crept through her open window, the curtain would flutter, and there'd be a ripple of light above her. It was a reflection from the fish pond in the back garden. It was only on a very rare night that the night and the pond and the gap in the clouds lined up just right. She waited in between ripples, trying to predict when the next silvery glimpse would come. She never guessed right. It was always much longer between ripples than she hoped. Nothing made much sense. She hated those boys so much, but there was nothing, no, not one thing she could do about them. It was a year now, more than that had been picking on her, and she couldn't remember, had no idea what started it. She didn't understand it. Didn't understand them. They'd poked and poked and poked with their words, just following her around, and if she'd ever talked back to them, she'd try to ignore them, like people said you should. They'd just do that thing they had done outside Nicholas's house, repeat it back in the baby talk. There was no way to beat them, no way to escape them, and they never did it when people were around. If she was with Jess, they would ignore her. But the moment Jess had gone, they'd be there poking and prodding with their questions. Frank had tried to explain it to her, but Jess just didn't get it, didn't understand how horrible it was. They're just boys, she'd said. Of course they're idiots. Their game, she knew, was to wind her up until she snapped, until she shouted at them, or hit out at them, or burst into blithering tears, and it had happened more than once. They had just laughed and laughed. She hated being laughed at. It made her feel powerless, which of course she was. She couldn't change anything. There was a flash of moonlight on the ceiling. It rippled, cool and white. She felt sick. Even the moonlight wasn't enough to take that away. Thinking about Noble made her feel sick. Not actually sick, just that pre-sick feeling, as if she might throw up. She sat there, somewhere between her stomach and her throat, clogging her up. She was almost crying. It was pathetic. And then, from nowhere, she remembered the music. The strange music she'd heard hidden away in the house of Nicholas Underbridge. And then she heard thought of Nicholas Underbridge, of how kind he'd been, and how she didn't dare return that kindness. It was okay here in the dark, when no one could see inside her head or heart, to admit that she'd almost sort of liked him, but she couldn't ever let anyone know that. He was not someone she could be friends with. No one was friends with him. But that music, there was something in it, even in the memory of it, that lifted her spirits, that made her feel light and hollow and almost happy. It made her feel clean. It was weird, because she didn't even like music much. She'd given up the record because of the noise it made. But she had to hear more of this, had to find out what it was. All she needed to know was the name, then she could get her mum or dad to buy the CD. Tomorrow she'd go and ask. One quick visit, no one would notice. Most of her class were away on holiday. Jess was off in some posh farmhouse in the south of France. They'd never know she'd been around Nick's house twice. Did she just call him Nick? She had to watch out for that. But in truth, it was only a little worry, and it didn't stop her falling asleep to sweet, calm dreams for the first time in months and months.